A new swath of documents was released in the Epstein files, released by official government sources. There's so many documents here, like 3 million. I know that Elon Musk has been a bit on the defensive. You've been making this your weekend project. You've been reading through this stuff religiously. What did you find, Lucas?
Well, you mentioned Elon Musk. Yes, there was one of my first shockers. Elon Musk said he had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. He, got in a fight with somebody in the White House, possibly Scott Bessent, got a black eye, left the Doge committee, and then tweeted out that Donald Trump was hiding the Epstein files. Well, I think he was right about that, or he tweeted that Donald Trump was implicated in the Epstein files. And sure enough, there is a lot about Donald Trump. Some of that got pulled back, but there is a gamut of of surprises in it, and I think that we've barely scratched the surface, given that there are 3 million documents released so far. Um, I've I've listened to Tom Massey, who says that there are more documents, and that even these documents that have been released have politically motivated redactions that are still withholding some of the names and information from us. But all that aside, there's been a lot, and surprise, surprise, there's even news about Bitcoin in it too. So I don't know where we want to begin, but
Well, and Ripple has somehow been implicated with Jeffrey Epstein. He was all over the place, so no surprise that a lot of big projects and things are referenced here because Epstein had his hands in a lot of different things as financing various activities. He contributed to Bitcoin through the what MIT Foundation.
through MIT's Media Lab. So, and this, there was no surprise that Jeffrey Epstein had been targeting especially MIT and Harvard, both for academic papers. Ghislaine Maxwell's father had been kind of in the business of sweeping up as much academic research that some of the top universities in the United States had been engaging in and courting bright minds who were associated with those universities. So, that has drawn the likes of Stephen Hawking, Noam Chomsky, Larry Summers. Larry Summers is, um, some of these people were being courted. I don't know how much they were aware of the dark side of Jeffrey Epstein, but boy, there's a lot of correspondence with Larry Summers. He definitely gets a black eye. But yes, MIT also has had a great awareness and a lot of input with regards to the rise of cryptography, or with cryptocurrency, and that goes back to their roots in academic research in cryptography. So, but Jeffrey Epstein seems to have been very aware of cryptocurrency. Uh, and through him, I would imagine that some of um, the political nodes of his organization had an eye towards what might be possible through cryptocurrencies, uh, and I would not be surprised if we see that there are more than Bitcoin and Ripple that that they were interested in getting a foot in the door, um, having inside information as to what's going on with the development of those currencies, and possibly manipulating them towards what ends they would like to see them either used for, or the way that they behave.
So I think Bill Gates was also largely prominently featured in this new drop of documents. Some really crazy stuff that he was engaged in. Got an STD somehow through his activities with Epstein, and then tried to do some stuff with his wife. And oh man, this just is some really terrible behavior here. I wonder if we'll even see Bill Clinton on TV, or not Bill Clinton, but Bill Gates on TV anymore.
I you know, I don't know. The question is, will we see him in a courtroom? Um, the email there's Jeffrey Epstein has this very terse communication style, terse, oblique, almost as if he's engaged in um, illegal activities, and he doesn't want to be too verbose in describing those illegal activities. We could also guess that he had an idea that um, other state actors were attuned to um, his position and the importance of his communication, and might have been snooping around his communication. But Jeffrey Epstein is always very terse, except with a couple of exceptions. There's 3 million documents in there. Maybe it's more than a couple, but one of them is a notable email to Bill Gates, and in that email, and Bill Gates, uh, he makes allusions to Bill Gates contracting an STD and asking Jeffrey Epstein to procure uh, medicine for that, so that Bill Gates can slip it to his wife, unbeknownst to her. And Bill Gates did go through a divorce, and morphed into Sweater Vest Bill Gates, which might have been a calculated public persona decision made to him around this time. But yeah, I don't know how much we're going to see of Bill Gates. Again, I can't say Bill Gates without thinking Bill Clinton. Um, uh, Bill
Well, it's
Clinton.
an easy slip because they're both prominently featured in documents that were released. So there's two bills, and neither of them is looking very good coming out of what's been released.
Yeah, and they were also in they're also analogous sort of in their times in power. Um, Bill Gates is still a very rich man, with and Bill well, Clinton likewise. I didn't see as many, a lot of the emails are allegations. They're synopses by the FBI of allegations of, somebody who has contacted them, and um and said, I was at a party, I was at a Jeffrey Epstein party, this and this occurred, and these were some of the people that were there. That's often where you see the names of Bill Clinton um and Donald Trump come up. So there's a question in my mind as to, are these prominent figures, for whom that was easy to take a pot shot? How much of this is verifiable? But um, given the number of allegations, you also have to begin to sit back and wonder at, well, what the hell is the Justice Department doing? And they did bring Jeffrey Epstein to, or did charge Jeffrey Epstein in Florida, but he got a plea deal. Um, that's kind of disgusting, and you also just have to wonder about our legal system. Why weren't these allegations aired? Why wasn't there a trial in front of a jury of his peers? Why was all of this information suppressed and only put on the desk of figures in the judiciary, in the Department of Justice, which is not the judiciary, and in some cases, it got over to the judiciary, to some judge's desk, and yet there was never a, a public trial, um, in which the public began to be made aware of at least the allegations, if not some of the truth behind the privilege of the allegations. So that to me was the most um, sad and damning um, contextual cloud that laid over these Epstein files.
Wheels of justice turn slowly, if at all, and rarely for the powerful. It doesn't seem like much of anything has happened as a result of these documents being released, except for Musk coming out and denying he had anything to do with it, even though it's pretty clear that he had something to do with Jeffrey Epstein as a result of these documents. He was one of the most vocal over the weekend, just tweeting all over the place.
Oh, you know what? I have him on mute. I didn't know that he was tweeting. I do know that he said that he had not been on Epstein Island, but whenever you see a question or an email in which he's asking Jeffrey Epstein when he can come over and when's a hot night to party, um,
Yeah, and his child, Elon Musk's child, has come out and said that these things are confirmed that they were in the right place at the right time to corroborate what was in these emails, and that any further information needed, uh, planned to provide it.
yeah, well, what a spin on sanctimony that Elon Musk has donned. Um, he was begging to get on the island, for whatever reason, he didn't get on it. That could be the truth. I mean, he could be telling the truth, "I was never on the island," but he certainly was asking to be, and he wanted to hop into the hot parties. Let's not forget too that, Elon Musk's, slept with the wife of Sergey Brin, who turned around and was, I can't think of her name. What's her name now? She ran as Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s running mate in the presidential election.
Nicole
Um,
Shanahan?
yeah, yeah, that's the reason Sergey Brin and Nicole Shanahan got divorced, was because she had slept with Elon Musk. So uh, uh, we know Elon's claims to, I don't know, some sort of family man above board are untrue at the outset.
Well, he's had like 5 different families, so I don't sure about his,
Yeah.
moral high ground.
Well, remember too, he's just a poor boy who came to America and worked hard and made rich. And oh, wait a second, my daddy had a Rolls Royce and an emerald mine. Um, so you know, don't even get me started there. But back to the Epstein files. I don't know if you want to talk about the Bitcoin revelation. Uh,
Yeah,
um,
tell me more about the Bitcoin revelation. What was going on here other than, Epstein provided some financing, I think, right?
so one of the emails that we see is between Jeffrey Epstein and I think somebody on the board of Media Labs at uh,
At MIT?
yes, at MIT. And the Media Lab was Media Labs was very interested in what computers, the advent of technology. I think it goes back to the 80s and the 90s. I'm not sure. I've been to Media Lab actually, and in another lifetime. I had a friend who was working on robotics there, and I visited it once, but it was sort of after its heyday, actually around the time that this email was going around. Um, but Media Lab is, when I visited Media Lab, they had courted, they had brought into this building on campus, all of these people who were working on projects like Bright Ideas, Breaking Technology, an eye towards using technology to change behavior, to have a great impact on the world. Well, um, the email between Jeffrey Epstein and this board has to do with Bitcoin, and it was around the time that Gavin Newsom was part of who was leading the Bitcoin Foundation, and the email lays out what the Bitcoin Foundation was, and that there were a couple of core developers who were essentially in charge of Bitcoin, and that the Bitcoin Foundation was bankrupt, and the developers had been funded through the Bitcoin Foundation, but were now in a period of stasis. And the email says that that many organizations had tried to um, take control of the developers, uh, but that Media Labs had moved quickly and um, and made offers to at least three of the developers, and those developers had decided to join Media Lab.
Seems somewhat innocuous. That I mean, okay, he funded it.
So, well, I don't think that's innocuous at all. There's a narrative around Bitcoin. There's in part there is the creation myth, Satoshi Nakamoto. We've talked about that at length. I think we understand here that it was a very sophisticated product, and that there was probably not just one person. So, alarm bell. Why is there this prevailing narrative about Satoshi Nakamoto? Why is there this cult that's grown up around that foundation myth? Well, that should cause us to begin to question um, uh, um, that should raise questions. I should say. I don't know what it causes. I don't know what answers it leads to. But then when you layer on that this narrative that it's open source and that the miners control Bitcoin, that's also not necessarily true. And here we have a very candid discussion in this Media Labs in internal email, or not quite internal, but from the board to Jeffrey Epstein, who was providing a lot of funding for Media Lab, and has a very candid discussion about a growing technology and says that this technology is really in the control of a couple of people. And if we can pay off a couple of people, then we can have control of of this technology. And I think that's a lot truer assessment uh, of the reality of how Bitcoin has been created and been managed since its inception. And I think maybe the greatest impact this is going to have is that that reality about the nature of Bitcoin is going to become unavoidable, and it has already led to um, you know rifts in the Bitcoin community about the direction, and the nature of Bitcoin. Is it for hodling? Is it for spending? Is you know was it was it made to be used by the blue collar everyman, or was it made to be used and held by um, by financial institutions? Um, and there's even there's even a now that I think about it, there's even a sort of one email that is um, very disparaging towards some of the Bitcoin, some of the early, I can't remember what they said, what they called us, but the very early Bitcoin idealists, and um, that was. Um, I could see the correlation between, the block size wars and this idea: was Bitcoin for use
So,
or was it for hodling?
so is the idea here that somehow when Jeffrey Epstein got involved, he was able to subvert the original design and ideas behind Bitcoin that had existed, and that this influx of cash and buying off these few people allowed them to steer Bitcoin in a direction that was detrimental to Bitcoin and to the original ideals of Bitcoin? Is that sort of the thesis?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the original, you know, when people were looking for originally to cryptocurrency, for what did they want? They wanted an alternative to the dollar. What did people who held a lot of dollars want? They wanted a financial tool that they could use to accrue more dollars. And when Bitcoin was changed from being something that was more ideally held rather than spent, they succeeded in creating a financial tool that they could use to step out of um, to use to accrue more dollars. And that's quite obviously where Bitcoin is today. Um, I don't think that was the original intent. Um, and and it's we see here that that was not happenstance. That was not because there was some democratic or this narrative of the miners or the holders of Bitcoin making those decisions. Those decisions were made by the people who were paying the developers. So,
I mean, it's an interesting thought that if you can pay off a few developers, that somehow that would allow you to subvert and control Bitcoin. I don't see what decisions particularly they're pointing at. That'd be an interesting thing to look a little deeper into, as to how they changed it. If we're pointing at the block size wars particularly, that would have been what, around 2017, that this discussion or whatever paying off would have had to have occurred. Or maybe you're saying that seeds were planted sooner than that, and that
well, the the insertion or the introduction of Media Labs is in April, or the email is from April 25th, 2015. And it says that we've moved quickly to take control of the developers. So then to
right. But
develop,
what specific decisions did they influence? That's what I'm thinking
well,
about right now,
well,
is like, in what way did they subvert the vision of Bitcoin?
absolutely the block size wars, but also the ossification. If
Yeah, but the ossification, these are things that we've pointed to later in time. This isn't 2015. We certainly were not in the ossification period of Bitcoin at that point. That was a hot and heavy development time. They were still making pretty substantive changes to Bitcoin. I would say at least through 2017, when we had the first big split, and the development of Bitcoin has not stopped. It's This ossification thing is really a criticism around Bitcoin's inability to keep up with the smart contract programming. Like, this is the thing that somewhat hobbled it. It certainly fulfilled most of its mission for quite some time. Even now, I would say we don't really need the larger block sizes, because the blocks are not full. Like, we're not using the blockchain to its fullest extent. So, scaling Bitcoin really isn't a prime issue at this point. Y-
well,
I
I would just work backwards from, if a cryptocurrency is going to be, if Bitcoin was to it was to work with the existing financial system, then creating a cryptocurrency that was inert, was inert, didn't have smart contracts like gold, inert like gold, and also was limited in availability, um, uh, and had higher transaction fees. These would all be in these would all play towards, I don't know, whales, traditional whales in the financial world. And it seems that those were the decisions that were made in the history of Bitcoin. I mean, all that aside, um, that we begin to say, wait a second, there are core developers who make the decisions in Bitcoin, that the political process is, um, or the supposed political process is not where the decision is made. The cathedral, the Bitcoin has been moved into a chapel of the cathedral. Um, uh, uh, I, I think that is the revelation that we have here. And
Yeah, but here's part of it, and this is somewhat maybe getting away a bit from our core thesis of Epstein, but I think it does inform upon, like, what we can learn from looking through the Epstein files. Is that There was disagreements about what Bitcoin should be. I mean, Bitcoin started from this small team that had an idea about what they wanted to do, and they would routinely go out there and talk about what it is that they were trying to accomplish through this mechanism of using this mouthpiece of Satoshi Nakamoto, this straw man or whoever this ended up being. Somebody was in control of that, was largely authoring these things, and was talking for the group or the team that created Bitcoin. um, as more people started to join in, this became a broader conversation. And there was always the nuclear option to say, we don't like what Bitcoin has become. Let's go do something else. Bitcoin Cash certainly did not go along with any of the things we're discussing right now. It just isn't that well trafficked. It isn't that well liked. It's not that popular. It's not being used as much. And the reasons for that are manifest. There's a reason that Bitcoin Cash is not considered to be Bitcoin. So there's always been a nuclear option that some people don't like how Bitcoin is, that they can go do something else. It's just that the world has spoken that they want this other thing instead. I think there is some democracy to voting with your feet and what you hold, what you sell, what gets more attention in traffic. And centrally controlling these things isn't necessarily very easy to do, even if you are in control of the developers.
Well, I would say that more broadly, there that if we entertain the notion of the cathedral, of Curtis Yarvin's cathedral, and we accept that, and we say this is reality, well, there is a there's a world of people who exist inside the regular financial system. Cryptocurrency is offering an alternative for the cathedral to bring in cryptocurrency, and you say they would vote with their feet. Well, um, you also have to think about the assessment of Bitcoin's value with regards to its market cap. Like all of a sudden, it has been moved inside the 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 control of the cathedral, and 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 I think this was maybe gets to more of the I said that uh, that that some of Epstein's um, colleagues may have been interested in the use of cryptocurrency for, money laundering, moving money around that's outside of the control of the United States dollar. That's all part of it. But I think there is a broader, um, if we begin to say, wait a second, the current financial system isn't fair, and there are whales who abuse their bully, their pile of chips um, in order to add to their pile of chips, whatever, to play the game, then they would want to control the alternative that was developing. And I think that would be I think that's the reason that they were. I think that's the driving reason that they're interested in cryptocurrency. So if we think of cryptocurrency as an alternative, we have to understand that um, it has been tainted, um, going back for some time.
Yeah, the tainted part's the part that doesn't sit easily for me. You'd have to point to very specific things that you would say these were antithetical to whatever was desired in Bitcoin, and there was a lot of contention within the community itself as that there wasn't consensus about what Bitcoin should be, how it should move forward, and these schisms, famously resulted in some of the landscape that we currently have. I mean, Craig Wright took his chips and went and did BSV. I mean, this was Bitcoin Satoshi's vision. It was espousing that there had been problems that they had said needed to be corrected, and yet the major winner in all of this has continuously been this canonical Bitcoin. I just have a hard time on this one unless we point to specific things and say this was somehow a subversion. This was where people didn't want this, and somehow it made its way in. Yet all the miners said that they weren't interested in some particular feature. It's hard without specifics to say that somehow Bitcoin lost its way.
Well, hopefully somebody comes, dives in deeply into what these revelations are and comes back with those specifics. It's my nature to keep an eye on the horizon and say, what are the large forces at play here? And um, and so I don't have those specifics. You mentioned Craig Wright. That's a name that I never saw in any of the Epstein allegations. You know, there's
Well, and if he had been, the Satoshi, then I'm sure that he would have shown up. But clearly, that was been found to be not the case. I'm just pointing to him as another individual who said somehow Bitcoin's lost its way, created his own thing. There have been a litany of individuals and teams that have said, this is what's wrong, and so we got to correct it. And yet, Bitcoin remains it's stalwart. Its adoption is unparalleled.
Well, there is a Bitcoin another Bitcoin name that, pops up all over Epstein, and that's Michael Saylor. Jeffrey
Tell me
Epstein.
mo tell me more about that because Michael Saylor has not been as busy in the news. We haven't heard as much from him. We did certainly weren't aware of these allegations as far as I knew. It's like, is this is kinda news that Michael Saylor is somehow tied to Jeffrey Epstein?
Okay, the threads that I remember off the top of my head, there are 2 that come to mind. One was a discussion between Jeffrey Epstein and I believe a publicist in LA. I forget her name. Um, and I don't have these in front of me, and I read a lot over the weekend. Um, so go search for Epstein and Michael Saylor and see what you come up with. But one of them is sort of a um, some some not nice comments made by somebody who's throwing parties with Jeffrey Epstein that says Michael Saylor is a dud. Um, but the other one that I found more interesting is between Jeffrey Epstein um, and another person, and they're talking about uh, having parties and who uh, what powerful names are going to be at the parties. And I believe it's St. Bart's, and and Jeffrey Epstein is asked who he's staying with, and he says, "I'm staying with Michael Saylor." So that implies a close relationship between the two of them. And if we go back and say, wait a second, what were some of the what if Jeffrey Epstein was using Media Labs as a front to a broader ring of organizations that he controlled or manipulated um, through his through what he was funding to establish some sort of relationship with Michael Saylor, and then to go back to what I said earlier about the market cap of Bitcoin or controlling some of the public face of Bitcoin, then a relationship with Michael Saylor will is interesting to think about
I
because
wonder if it was, Jeffrey Epstein that actually told Michael Saylor about Bitcoin. Now that'd be an interesting thing.
I don't think so. I think Michael Saylor knew about Bitcoin very early. I mean, like maybe even before the white paper was released in 2009. I do I I know that there well that's a question. I'm operating or I'm speaking from a long memory there, but I haven't checked up on that. But I believe Michael Saylor was very, very, very early in um, in not just knowing what Bitcoin was, but what buying Bitcoin um, and and being loud about it. So, and if that's the case, then I would imagine that Jeffrey Epstein approached and courted him, and he may have been unaware, or he may have been aware of Jeffrey Epstein's relationship with Media Labs and their and the Media Labs relationship with the Bitcoin core developers. That could all they could all have just Michael Saylor could have just seen that group as working with or sidling up to the developers who are in control of Bitcoin. I'm not sure, but regardless, Jeffrey Epstein, well, from Jeffrey Epstein's angle, I don't find the relationship to be benign.
Interesting. Well, we'll keep processing and we'll watch through whatever we see others dig up. I'm sure you'll spend a bit more time in there as well. 3 million files is a lot to go through. So I'd say this is a crowdsource effort more than anything else, because it takes time, even if you're just searching for keywords to read any particular document. Be interesting if there's teams out there throwing this into AI and trying to get some AI insights out of it. I'm sure there are. We'll be watching for developments, but yeah, first off the rip from getting this document dumped, some very powerful individuals being implicated, and interesting developments for both Ripple and Bitcoin within the latest Epstein's. And with that, we'll see you next time on FOMO.